Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. A ton of news surrounding the college football world right now as the transfer portal absolutely going insane. One of the pieces of news that is going under the radar, but I think a massive storyline, not only in the Big Ten, but in the college football landscape, is Penn State going out and hiring Coach Kotelnicki from Kansas to be their next offensive coordinator. And if you guys have listened to me talk the last couple months, whenever we're talking Kansas football, I always mention Coach Kotelnicki and how much I love this offense and the scheme of this offense. And if you're a Penn State fan, you have to be absolutely fired up about bringing Coach Kotelnicki to Happy Valley, working with Drew, working with this rushing attack. This Penn State offense, quite frankly, just did not get maximized the last couple of years. You're looking at a coach that I think is going to maximize the talent, maximize the personnel in this offense. And if you can get this Penn State offense going, this is one of the best teams in the entire country. Because you look at the defensive side of the ball, I would put that as the number one defense that we saw all year in college football, and that's coming from a Michigan fan. I mean, this Penn State defense, the real deal. And if you can get this offense to come along, that is how you close the gap in the Big Ten for a national championship. Really excited for the Penn State fans here. Want to talk a little bit about what went wrong with this Penn State offense, what needs to get fixed, and how Coach Kotelnicki is going to do so. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. The support that you guys have shown the boys for these offseason hires, it's been wild. It's been a blast for me to talk about. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And for Penn State fans, now that you got a new offensive coordinator, I wouldn't be surprised if you see James Franklin and this Penn State football program get a little bit more aggressive in the transfer portal as they try to get the personnel in on the offensive side of the ball to maximize the offense. So we'll be covering that as well. Again, appreciate all the support. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And let's get into Coach Kotelnicki. And I first want to start with this Penn State offense and talk about what went wrong. You look on the surface level, 34.8 points per game. That was top 20 in the country for Penn State in scoring offense. It doesn't look too bad. But you look at some of these numbers, and Penn State fans know this if you watched every Saturday, there were some problems in this offense. And largely, it was stale and it lacked explosiveness. And that is exactly what it's not going to be with Coach Kotelnicki at the helm. Taking a look at the passing game, that's kind of the big bugaboo here. 58% completion percentage. That was 83rd in the country. But the number that you have circled in your notes here, 6.5 yards per pass attempt. That was outside the top 90 in the country. This passing attack was stale. It lacked any sort of creativity, and it lacked pretty much any sort of explosiveness. I mean, you have a quarterback in Drew that is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the entire country, and to kind of keep him in this box and not really attack the deeper third, not be able to hit any explosive plays was kind of inexcusable. And that's kind of why you go in a different direction with the offense. And quite frankly, even the run game left a little bit to be desired with how good that offensive line is and how good the running backs were to only average 4.5 yards per carry outside of the top 40. Not really the expectation. And on average, only 5.3 yards per play. That was 73rd in the country. This offense, although points per game was pretty good, you look at that offense, especially in the big games against teams like Ohio State and against teams like Michigan, it just did not show up. That's why James Franklin goes in a different direction. And I don't think he could have found a better offensive coordinator. And this is when jobs were opening up, the Oklahoma OC, I mentioned Coach Kotelnicki. I think he's one of the best offensive minds in all of college football. You look at this, what they did last year with a backup quarterback for the majority of the season, 32.3 points per game. That was top 25 in the country. But more importantly, 6.8 yards per play, 8th in the country, 5.4 yards per carry, top 10 in the country, a 62% completion percentage. But here's the number you're circling, and probably the number that James Franklin was circling when he's looking for his new OC. 9.4 yards per pass attempt. That is 8th in the country. This Kansas offense last year, they wanted to run the football, running it over 60% of the time. But when they did go through the air, they were hitting the explosive plays. They were pushing the ball down the field. Coach Kotelnicki and his kind of offensive philosophy is to put the defense in conflict. A lot of misdirection, a lot of pre-snap movement, kind of straining the eyes of the linebackers and safeties. And he did a phenomenal job getting his playmakers the football in space. And you look at that Penn State offense, that didn't happen nearly enough. I mean, there was not a lot of space to operate in this Penn State offense. The guys were kind of squeezed down in the box. You look at this rushing attack, and this is probably what excites me most about Coach Kotelnicki, excuse me, coming to Penn State. You had two running backs at Kansas that had extremely good seasons the last 2 years. In 2023, Devin Neal goes 6.6 yards per carry, runs for over 1,200 yards. Daniel Highshaw, 5.2 yards per carry, over 700 yards. You look at this Kansas offense, and the running backs were thriving in this Kansas offense. A really dynamic rushing attack that's going to get to the perimeter, that's going to run between the tackles. It's an offense that is the opposite of stale. Is really the opposite of what this Penn State offense looked like last year. It's going to attack in multitude of different ways. And you look at the running backs that are going to be on Penn State's roster, combined with the offensive line. Let's put it frankly, I think Kansas has done a really good job with this program and turning around the personnel. The talent that Coach Kotelnicki is going to be operating with at Penn State is going to be night and day better. You look at a guy like Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. I wouldn't be surprised if you see both those running backs go over 1,000 yards next year with how much they're going to run the football and how creative they're going to be with those two running backs. I think you'll see a lot of two running back sets like you saw at Kansas last year. At the end of the day, you look at this Kansas offense and say, this is an offense that schemed up a lot of points because they didn't quite have the personnel to compete in the Big 12. Why has Kansas had so much success? It wasn't because they're dominating on the recruiting trail. They're developing players and putting their players in the best spots to be successful, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. That's why Kansas has been winning a lot of games the last 2 years. You look at Penn State, that hasn't been happening enough. I mean, can we look at this Penn State offense and say, yeah, these players have been put in great positions to dominate, and matches their skill set, and it's creative, and it's operating under space? No, you can't really say any of that about this Penn State offense. So you bring in a guy who not many better offensive-minded head coaches, or coaches, I should say, than Coach Kotelnicki at doing this. The last thing I want to say in this conversation is, what kind of guys might Penn State target in the transfer portal in the next couple of weeks? Right? Penn State didn't get that aggressive and, quite frankly, didn't really hit on many guys in the transfer portal on the offensive side of the ball. A guy like Dante Cephas, someone we expected to have a massive year for Penn State in 2023, largely ineffective. And you look at the Penn State receiving or pass catching room in general, your number one receiver was Lambert Smith. He had a solid year. But you look at the next two leading receivers were your tight ends. And what does that tell you? You're not getting the ball to enough to your wide receivers. And I'm not trying to be an anti-tight end guy here, but I'm more highlighting the fact that they weren't really getting their playmakers in space. In a healthy offense, you're seeing multiple wide receivers go over 500 yards. You're seeing a lot of weapons kind of flourish in an offense. You didn't really see that for Penn State. So taking a look at how they could revamp this wide receiver room, get a little bit more talent, I'm going to point out two wide receivers that Penn State has already offered in the transfer portal. First guy we're going to talk about, Jamori Macklin. If you guys are kind of some old school college football fans, Jeremy Macklin's cousin, started his career out at Missouri, transfers to North Texas in 2023, over 1,000 yards, but the number I'm highlighting, 16.5 yards per catch. This is a guy that has a ton of speed, can be really good in the open field. Penn State wants to hit more explosive plays. That's why they're bringing in Coach Kotelnicki. A guy like Jamori Macklin is one of those dudes that can certainly provide those big plays. Now, the next guy I want to go to, and a guy that's just really exciting, hits the transfer portal after Jimbo Fisher gets fired in that 2023 class, Raymond Cottrell. They reached out, gave him an offer. You're looking at a wide receiver that's 6'3", 220 pounds, ran an 11,200-meter dash time coming out of high school. Hasn't really played much college football at the Power 5 level. Hasn't played much college football, period. But this is a guy that's dripping in talent. There's a reason he's a top 10 player in the transfer portal as we speak. Penn State, I think, will get aggressive in the transfer portal, trying to get playmakers into this offense. These are two names that I certainly would keep an eye on. They've already offered them both, and I would foresee us talking a lot of Penn State football in the transfer portal the next couple of weeks, so keep your eyes open for that. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. I think Penn State absolutely crushed it with this hire. Coach Kotelnicki, one of the best in the game at calling an offense. Again, if you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.